Good morning. We're called to worship with these words from Paul Stephen Dadenoff. Joy and grief, health and sickness, light and darkness, peace and anger, life and death, wholeness and brokenness. We each bring all of these here to this sanctuary of unity and diversity for this 1 hour of this one day, and pour them out, commingling the stories of our lives to become the flame of this chalice, the symbol of our shared living faith. And now, won't you please join me in affirming our covenant, which begins with the word love. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Today, we are continuing our series about what it means to do church and to claim a religious identity as Unitarian Universalists. And today, we're focusing on what it means that we are an intentionally diverse religious community, united not by shared beliefs, but by shared promises. Because here we know we believe that each of us holds a piece of the truth. So to help us get started, I have a story to share today about a group of friends who each perceived the same thing, but a little bit differently. They each had a slightly different version of the truth. This is a wisdom tale from India called The Blind People and the Elephant. So long ago, 6 blind people lived in this village in India. And since they couldn't see the world for themselves, they had to imagine many of its wonders. They listened carefully to the stories told by others who had traveled outside their village to learn about what life was like in other places. The people were very curious about many of the stories that they had heard, but they were especially curious about elephants. They were told that elephants could trample forests, they could carry huge burdens, and they could scare predators with their loud trumpeting voices. But they also knew that the Raja's daughter rode an elephant. The first blind person said,
"An elephant must be a powerful giant."
They had heard stories about elephants being used to clear forests and build roads. And so the second blind person said,
"No, you must be wrong. An elephant must be graceful and gentle if a princess is to ride on its back."
The third person said,
"You're wrong. I have heard that an elephant can pierce a person's heart with its terrible tusks."
The fourth person said,
"You are all mistaken. An elephant is nothing more than a large sort of cow."
The fifth blind person said,
"I am sure that an elephant is something magical since it carries the princess safely throughout the kingdom."
The sixth blind person said,
"I don't believe elephants exist at all."
Finally, the villagers grew tired of all of the arguments, so they took the blind folks to visit the palace of the Raja to learn the truth about elephants. When they reached the palace, they were led to a courtyard, and there stood an elephant. The first blind person reached out and touched the side of the huge animal.
"An elephant is smooth and solid, like a wall. It must be very powerful."
The second person put their hand on the elephant's limber trunk.
An elephant is like a giant snake.
The third blind person felt the elephant's pointed tusk.
I was right. This creature is as sharp and deadly as a spear.
The fourth person touched one of the elephant's 4 legs.
What we have here is an extremely large cow.
The fifth person felt the elephant's giant ear.
I believe an elephant is like a huge fan, or maybe a magic carpet that can fly over mountains and treetops.
The sixth person gave a tug on the elephant's coarse tail.
Why, this elephant is nothing more than an old piece of rope.
They were led to the shade of a tree, where they continued to argue about the elephant.
An elephant is like a wall.
No, an elephant is like a giant snake.
It's a spear, I tell you.
I am certain it is a giant cow.
Magic carpet.
Don't you see? It is nothing but a piece of rope.
Wall.
Snake.
Spear.
Cow.
Carpet.
Rope. And then a very angry voice called out.
Stop with the shouting.
It was the Raja, awakened from his nap by the noisy argument.
How can each of you be so certain you are right? The elephant is a very large animal, and each of you touched only one part. Perhaps if you put the parts together, you will see a larger truth. Now let me finish my nap in peace.
The 6 people were led to a cool garden where they rested quietly in the shade, thinking about the Raja's advice.
He's right. To find a larger truth, we must put all of the pieces of the truth together. Let's talk about this on the journey home.
All right. We know that our UU faith has something in common with this story. We draw a wide circle with room for many ideas and many beliefs. I'm actually going to draw it now. Don't judge my circle drawing abilities. It might be an oval, but it'll still be very wide. A perfectly imperfect circle. Another way to say that is that in our UU church, we have something called religious pluralism. And that means we draw our spiritual wisdom and inspiration from so many sources. And we don't all have to see things exactly the same way to be welcome in this community. But what is welcome in our diversity and what is not? Let's see if we can explore what might belong inside this giant wide circle of community and what might be outside. Okay. I have a picture here. Right, so this beautiful heart, there is one spirit of life that some people call God, that is a source of goodness and love in the universe. Do we think that belongs inside our wide circle? See some head nods? Okay, I'm going to add that. Put that inside the circle. Oh, thank you. Yes, I'd love the assist. All right. You got it. All right. There is no way of knowing for sure if God exists. We just don't know. This one? Yeah. There's no way of knowing for sure if God exists. Does that idea belong inside our big circle? Do we have room for that? Yeah? Okay. All right, that belongs inside. What about the idea that God doesn't exist, but most people are basically good and loving, and it's up to people to create more love and more justice in the world? Does that fit? Okay. What about the idea that the teachings about love and justice from this man called Jesus, who lived over 2,000 years ago, has wisdom for us today? Do we think those old teachings from that man have wisdom for us now? Okay, all right, that one could go in there. All right, there's another person You might recognize this person whose name is Buddha. Does the wisdom of Buddha and their teachings have truth for us today? Yeah, okay. Toss that one in there. What about the idea that we are a part of an ongoing cosmic story of creation that started with a huge explosion in space? Does that fit in? See some thumbs up, some head nods, okay. We have room in our circle for so many of these big ideas. But I wonder if that means that every idea has a place in this circle. We embrace so many ideas, but I wonder if some things are not welcome in this circle. What about the idea that there is one type of family that is the right kind of family? Oh, thumbs down, I heard no. Okay, I think you have to put that one outside the circle. Way out there. All right, what about harmful ideas like bullying, discrimination, marginalizing people, right? Or saying it's not okay to stand up for what we believe in? Thumbs down. Our UU faith helps us remember that life doesn't have to be all this or all that, all in or all out. We can embrace a paradox. That's that confusing idea, that complicated state of being that two competing true things can still be true, both at the same time. We can affirm this big, beautiful circle of our diversity, and we can still hold the limits and the boundaries that we need. Let's breathe in together. Take a big breath out. And let us sing together to the words on your screen. We are going to keep exploring these ideas of the big circle we can draw in our faith as kids move into our special time in small groups in the other building. So I invite any children or young people now to move to the sides of the aisles and start to come towards the front. As everyone else, I invite you to rise and reach your arms over the center aisle to make an arch of blessing, taking special care of our friend Katie and her camera. Other building. You can go ahead and move right on through.
time of prayer or meditation. We settle our bodies, find your feet on the floor, find yourself fully here. Let your breath slow and deepen. If it helps, sometimes I need to put a hand on my belly to be able to do this, just to try to reconnect with that breath. So if it helps, I invite you to do that. And let your gaze soften. Some of you are already doing this, or close your eyes, whatever you feel comfortable, whatever allows you to be the most present. In our base camp class this week, we had a check-in where everyone was just sharing how they were feeling in their bodies. So I just invite you to check in with your body. How's your body doing? What word would you use to describe that? The word they used, like almost all of them, was the word heavy. You're feeling heavy in your body. So maybe you connect with that feeling of heaviness. We're just going to stay with that word for this time of meditation. So much feels heavy in the world. The heat doesn't really help with this. But in this space, we honor your heaviness. It is the weight you carry, whatever weight it is you carry, in your spirit, your body, your bones, the weight of history, the weight of grief, of anxiety or anger, the weight of caring for others, the weight of another variant and a never-ending pandemic, whatever it is that you are bearing, trying to hold and withstanding. Just allow yourself to feel that, and then in that feeling, say to yourself, thank you. Thank you, body, spirit, mind, for holding this. It is not an easy job. Thank you for all the ways you have tended and held and kept going. As you continue to breathe, don't forget to find that deep place in your belly to bring your breath all the way in and then all the way out. Just feel the others who are in this room with you. And those of you online, maybe take a moment and just notice the others who are in that gallery view, those other participants. Because the heat doesn't help with the heaviness, but community does. When we remember that we are not alone, and we don't need to carry any of these things alone. We can ask for help. We can receive help. We can forgive the past. We can release our grip on the present. We can breathe our way into the future. Together, we can do all of these things, because the future is not written yet. It is being born right now, and right now, and right now, among us, between us, in our breath, in our joy, in our hope. So on this day, we release ourselves into this community of memory and imagination. We release ourselves into gratitude and trust. Let us place our trust in a greater good, that is the gifts of interdependence, and the good news that there is so much more going on than we could ever know or understand. The good news that we are not in charge and we are not in control. and also the good news that together we have more power than we yet realize. So that when we join together, we can continue to bend the arc of the universe towards more love and greater justice. This is our prayer. It is also our practice. May it be so, and amen.
Please sing with me. You know this one. We'll do it 3 times total. So if you kind of get it after the first one, please join me. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby, you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name, will you ease this pain?
We have a reading today on the purpose of our church. In 1948, just like most congregations and houses of worship in the United States, the first Unitarian Society of Chicago was, according to their bylaws and their custom, only open to white people. For a long time, their members thought this was fine. But eventually, members started to realize that their UU faith was not consistent with this racism. The minister, the Reverend Leslie Pennington, was ready for this day and ready to take action. So was liberal theologian and member of the church's board of trustees, James Luther Adams. Together, they proposed a change in the church's bylaws to desegregate the church and welcome people, whatever color their skin. When the congregation's board considered the proposal, most of them supported it. But one member objected. Your new program is making desegregation into a creed, he said. You're asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating or inviting, even recruiting people of color to attend church here is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this? In 1948, anything about skin color and racism was controversial. Some people, even some who supported African Americans in demanding their civil liberties, believed in a separate but equal policy which kept people apart based on their skin color. Debate ensued. Both sides felt in their hearts that their belief was right. The debate went on into the night until the early hours of the morning. Everyone was exhausted and frustrated. Finally, James Luther Adams asked the person who voiced the strongest objection, "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" Suddenly, everyone was listening. The person who objected to change was listening, especially hard, to his own heart, as well as to the words he had heard from other board members through the long discussion. The board member who opposed opening the church to people of color finally replied, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get a hold of people like me and change them." And from that understanding, they moved forward with desegregating the first Unitarian Society of Chicago.
In the late 1990s, early 2000s, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Bishop Carlton Pearson experienced what he described as a divine revelation. He was, up until that point, an increasingly successful evangelical Pentecostal minister. He was rising in national popularity, his church was booming, but all of that changed when Bishop Pearson came to believe that there was no such thing as hell. After a whole career preaching traditional Pentecostal Christianity, Bishop Pearson realized that he described how God had spoke to him saying that there was no such thing as hell, that he believed instead in universal salvation, or what we would understand as traditional universalism. You may have heard his story. It was a while back now, but his story was offered on This American Life in a program called Heretics. You can still Google it, actually, today. So when Bishop Pearson told his church about this revelation and invited them to share and explore it with him, and then started preaching on universalism, he was very clear and filled with passion, just as most of his sermons before that had been. But ultimately, he was excommunicated by senior leaders in the community, and his church shrank as people went elsewhere. And then the building went into foreclosure, and they were just not sure. There was just a small fraction of the original size was there, and they weren't sure what to do. Which is when the Reverend Marlon Lavenhar, senior minister at the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, called him up. And he invited him and his remaining congregation to come join the community at All Souls, where they too were Universalists. So it started as visiting for a couple of services, gradually grew, shifted, until the people of Bishop Pearson's community, those that were remaining, all decided to become members of the All Souls Church. There was no official merger of these two communities. It's just more that these new members felt welcomed and in community together in covenant. So it went that a Black Pentecostal Universalist church became integrated with a mostly white Unitarian Universalist congregation. As you probably guessed, this was not an easy process. As Marlon said later, at first I thought I was going to lose my mind because I was so excited. And then I thought I was going to lose my ministry because of all the controversy it stirred up. Holding diversity in community is not a simple or well-honed practice in our culture. We are much better at hanging out with people who think like we do, who share our cultural norms, our vocabulary, and who come to the same basic conclusions and use the same tools and meaning. The people in our bubble, you might say, or even our tribe. It's why I think it can take so long to try to explain what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist and what we mean when we talk about being religious. This idea of intentionally welcoming diversity within a single religious community that is to be gathered by, not by creed, but by covenant, this is a totally new idea to most people. The Reverend Tom Beloit shares about a time that he attended this public protest, and a couple of reporters from a religious magazine came up to him to ask if they could have an interview with him. He told them that he was a Unitarian Universalist minister, and then they asked how to spell that, and then they asked what you believe. He explained that we are a covenantal church, and then he described how that means that we share promises of how we will be together, not a creed of what we must believe together. He says that's when the questions really started. Well, does your church believe in the Bible? They asked. Tom's response, well, that's a creedal question. We are a covenantal congregation. We share a covenant of how we try to be together, not what we are expected to believe together. Does your church believe in God? They asked. That is a creedal question. We are a covenantal faith. We share a covenant of how we try to be together, not what we are expected to believe together. This, he says, went on for a while. Maybe you have had similar experiences when you've tried to explain to your friends or family what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. People can get very confused. It is a new idea for a lot of people, but this way of being religious, it is not actually new at all. We trace our roots both back to the beginnings of Unitarianism and Universalism, thus the combined name, which both started as Christian heresies. Unitarianism was that heresy that there was no such thing as the Trinity because God was one. This also went on to imply that to emphasize the humanity of Jesus, less so the divinity. And then Universalism, on the other hand, that's the heresy that Bishop Pearson came to believe in. That's the heresy that the nature of God is love, and therefore this loving God would not damn any of God's people to hell. Another way that I've heard this said, and it's a nice shorthand if you're want to be done with the back and forth of trying to explain it, which is that Unitarianism affirms that we share the same source, and Universalism affirms we share the same destiny. One God, one love. The root of the word heretic, by the way, maybe some of you know, what does it mean? No? Such a good little tidbit. It means to choose. To be a heretic means simply to choose. And over the centuries, our faith was a community that believed that over and over that people have the right, they have the inherent right and need to choose what they believe. And that in turn created a whole tradition that affirms that there must be a whole bunch of different ways, valid choices that people can make in their beliefs. And that beliefs in turn are not as important as behaviors. That is the way we treat each other. As Unitarian Francis David said in the 16th century, we need not think alike to love alike. Discerning what it means to love alike, that is and then actually learn loving alike, that is learning to love in service of partnership and service of and in partnership with love itself. This is our whole religious practice. Learning how to and then actually loving alike. As the Reverend Victoria Safford puts it, the central question for us is not what do we believe, but more what are we committed to? To what larger love, people, principles, values, and dreams shall we be committed? To whom and to what are we accountable? Our answers to these questions allow us to discover the limits of our diversity, the boundaries of what it means to be a member of this community, which sometimes people do struggle with because it is that paradox that Lauren was speaking about. They think, oh, putting limits on diversity, isn't that maybe hypocritical or inconsistent to say that we welcome difference, but then not this sort of difference? It reminds me though of this cartoon that the Reverend Robert Latham, he used to use as an example whenever he'd preach about diversity. It's from Hagar the Horrible. Anybody? All right. Okay, we don't know heretic, but we do know Hagar the Horrible. I'm into it. Okay, so in case you don't know Hagar the Horrible, it's a cartoon about Vikings. Okay, stay with me. So in this one cartoon, it shows all of these Vikings in a boat rowing. Okay, some of the Vikings are using one end of the paddle as they row. The other Vikings are using a different end of the paddle. Some are going in one direction, some are like going a whole different direction, some are paddling really fast, some are going really slowly, and the boat, as you can imagine, is just sitting there motionless despite lots of Viking activity. And so the caption below this cartoon has the one Viking saying to the Viking that's calling out all the instructions, "Will you please stop saying different strokes for different folks?" It's pretty good, huh? Clarifying what we hold in common rather than only talking about our differences allows a deeper sense of belonging, identity, and purpose in community. It transforms us from a bunch of individuals who just happen to all show up at the same time and place on a Sunday morning into an actual people. It is also a way to create a sense of safety while we are navigating all that difference. Because, if you really engage diversity for real, it is often uncomfortable and complicated, especially in a world filled with so much loneliness and isolation. Pairing our embrace of diversity with the limits on that diversity can be a big gift we can offer one another in our world, because it can galvanize us to better understand and use our power, not just within our community, but beyond our community. This is what happened, I believe, when in 2016 we adopted our, what is now not as much of a new mission statement, but then was a new mission statement. It says, for those of you that don't know it, it goes, "We unleash courageous love in Northern Colorado and beyond by embracing our diversity, growing our faith, and awakening our spirit to the unfolding meaning of this life." Now, the large majority of people in 2016 and since have really appreciated this mission statement and felt really aligned with it and clarified with it, but some people didn't, and some people don't. And for some of those, that lack of alignment or appreciation went so far that they decided they just couldn't be a member of Foothills anymore. It just didn't work for them. And to be clear, I really don't ever, if you get to know me, I don't ever want anyone to leave. I want everyone to stay together and be in community together and to find their place. However, at the same time, when this happened, I actually felt really proud, because it meant that we were, as a whole collective, getting clear about the limits of our diversity. That is, who we are and who we aren't, to the point that people can recognize it. And that makes it clear how we can organize ourselves for a greater common purpose. It's like the declaration that you've probably heard many churches say. Many churches, sometimes on their street signs or in their advertisements, they'll say, "We welcome all." Many churches say that, but how many actually mean it? Zero, none, right? And that's okay. because there is no way that every community can be for every person. Even a community that is like ours, that is invested in the widest possible welcome, we aren't for everyone. We pair our diversity with limits on that diversity. One of my colleagues a few years ago suggested an alternative phrase. She said, how about we welcome all who welcome all? I like this a lot. It gets to the heart of what it means to be covenantal, I think, because it makes it clear what unites us. It says we are a people who rejoice in diversity and who understand the limit of that diversity as only when diversity is limited. Okay, I want to say it again because it's really helpful to think about this, that the limit of diversity is when diversity itself becomes limited. What it means is that in our church, we are just as invested, any of us, in the strange yet beautiful practice and truth that serves the person next to us as we are in the language and practices and songs and prayers that serve us. It means that we center humility and curiosity and that hard practice, very hard practice of being willing to change our minds. It also means that people who can't do this and then who insist that their way is the best way, the right way, the only way, these folks don't tend to hang around our churches too long. Our covenant of right relations and our new member welcome both affirm that in our congregation we know we're not going to always get our own way. And that's a good thing. Because what it means is that we are part of an intentionally diverse community where there are many ways. This distinction between we welcome all and we welcome all who welcome all played out regularly in that experiment at All Souls Tulsa over the last 15 years. Because it turns out, I know, shocker, Black Pentecostal Universalists understand and express their beliefs about the holy in very different ways than white Unitarian Universalists. And so the question became, which of these differences could the community hold, and which could it not? What were the true limits of their diversity? A few months into the integration of their communities, Marlon has shared that one of his longtime members came to talk with him. As he tells it, he was a longtime white member of the church, a staunch humanist, a lawyer, about 60 years old. And he said, Marlon, I'm going to tell you something that I would have never previously told anyone in the church. I grew up Pentecostal, and to this day, I still speak in tongues. Marlon said he tried not to look too surprised, but he was shocked. He asked, how often? And the man said, probably once or twice a week. He described it as a kind of meditation that allows his mind to rest. Marlon says, once I got over my initial disbelief and quietly checked my own prejudices, I was struck hardest by realizing that this was a central part of his spiritual life, and he had spent 30 years in our congregation and has never felt that he could tell anyone in our church without being judged negatively and maybe even being made to feel like an outsider. And he was right. Marlon goes on to say it was a pretty stark condemnation of me and my community that he felt he had to keep his truth, his spirituality in the closet in order to be welcomed in our church. I don't know the particulars, but I'm pretty confident that we too have our version of these prejudices. We have our ways that we implicitly and maybe even explicitly tell people that they are not welcome. We have our ways that we say that parts of them are not welcome, or certain ways of seeking the holy are not welcome. They're not our thing. Ways that we fail to make space for difference that would otherwise enrich us and challenge us and sure, make us uncomfortable, but also help us better see and better love more of life in all of its unfathomable diversity. As with all covenants, we fall short on our promise to welcome all, who welcome all, which is okay. It's part of the deal. As long as we remember that the other part of the deal is doing the hard work of repair and change and growth and beginning again in love. It's a practice that becomes even more important when we look at the other major challenge that all souls face in its integration. A challenge that's not entirely disconnected from that first expression, which was, of course, their capacity to hold real racial diversity. Even though by then 50 years had passed since debates like those at the First Unitarian Society of Chicago, and there were certainly no bylaws that prescribed segregation at All Souls, whiteness and white supremacy were very much alive in their system and in their mindsets, so much that they often didn't really even see it as such. For example, as you can imagine, they struggled a lot to accept the praise music that the new members preferred, or their appreciation of Jesus. They didn't think of this as a racial justice issue, but as Marlon later said to the UU World, quote, there is an African-American experience of God that has been molded and shaped by slavery, lynching, Jim Crow, and persistent racism. And this experience of God often involves Jesus. It also includes certain ways of moving, singing, and talking back in church. He went on to remind us that their new members don't think that this way is the only way. It's just their way in, profoundly shaped by their history and culture. And he said, if we can't accept that experience in our church, then we are not living by what we say. And so their community had to take a hard and honest look at themselves and do the work of answering that question, those questions that Victoria Safford asked. To what larger love, people, principles, values, and dreams shall we be committed? And they realized, turns out the purpose of their church was not to sing classic traditional Unitarian hymns, or to ensure that everyone remained silent in the pews the whole time, or even to make everyone who was there feel totally comfortable. The purpose of their church was to take hold of people like them and change them. That is to liberate them into a faith that is truly multiracial, multicultural, a mission they later described as loving beyond belief. The purpose of every religious community, including a diverse one like ours, is not neutral. It is always transformation, growth, and change. It is change in the direction of more and more love. The purpose is still, as it was in 1948, to grab hold of us personally and also collectively and shake loose all of our prejudices and release us into a greater freedom for us all. May it be so, and amen.
Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists and Jews got their own versions of the truth. There's a line in the sand, there's a war going on. They forgot to remember you might be wrong. Carry your faith everywhere you go. Mix it with love and let it show. Keep your mind open as you move along, and always remember you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God is on their side. throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong. Don't cut me off, don't say we're through, just because I don't agree with you. Flowers grow where seeds of love are sown. You could be right, but you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God is on their side. Just count to 10 before you throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong. What's on the other side of life? I won't know till the day I die. If you feel insecure, you're not alone. Everybody knows you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God is on their side. Just count to 10 before you throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong.
This month, we are so grateful to be sharing our offering with the work of Sanctuary Everywhere. This is both a Foothills initiative and an initiative of the wider community as we partner with a series of other local organizations, including La Cocina, La Familia, Alianza Norco. There's probably others that I'm missing there. But the work is to companion people, individuals, sometimes whole families, as they are seeking asylum. What this starts with entailing is helping them leave detention, because without a sponsoring person or people, people who are seeking asylum stay in detention, which we use that word, but let's just say it for what it is, which is jail. Okay, they're here seeking asylum from horrible trauma, and unless they are sponsored, they have to stay in jail. So in our community, we started to form with our partners these little villages that help to companion people as they are waiting out their asylum case. We started in 2019. We have sponsored 5 different people and families over the course of the last few years. We've learned so much. But all of this work requires, as you can imagine, financial support in and of itself. That is the support to help them find a place to live, support for food, for English language learning, for trauma-based counseling, all the things you can imagine somebody might need as they're trying to find their way in our community. So this month we are sharing our plate with this work and these efforts, and everything that you give will go to support the Sanctuary Everywhere villages and to support our mission of unleashing courageous love. You can give by the baskets, you can give by texting 84321, the amount plus the word share. We will now gratefully receive your generous offering. As we come to the end of our service, we take a moment to turn our attention towards gratitude. For those of you that are new, we practice this at the end of our services because so often in our lives, we turn our attention a lot towards the problems, the things that aren't working, but the things that will get us through, the things that remind us why, are actually the blessings. That practice of turning our attention to the things that are also true, the gifts, the goodness of life. So just invite you to kind of take a deep breath. Keep yourself again, like I said in the beginning of the service, as we come to the end, let's do it one more time, which is to find yourself fully here, in this room, just for a few more moments. And allow yourself to connect in with something that you are feeling grateful for. Maybe something small. The rain yesterday, it's pretty amazing. Or something big. I'm still reeling about those James Webb photographs. Very small, very big, something in between. Maybe it's the person next to you. People in the chat online, feel free to share. Whatever it is, just offer that place, that thing, that person, those people, sense of thank you. Let that thank you just keep filling you up. Now, usually what happens is we are like, okay, done. And then you go like, okay, is the service done? I need to get on with my day. But I invite you to just stay with it a little longer. Just one more minute. Just keep your brain focused on that place of blessing and goodness until it rises just a little bit more in you. So you feel that feeling of joy and goodness and blessing, all the gifts of this life, and then it's filling you up so much that you cannot help but rise in body or in spirit. And you just you find yourself just wanting to sing out with joy. Right? So I invite you, when you're there, please rise. We're just gonna find that joy and let it come out. So this is a song, most in the room, I guess, is we know the tune, but it's different words, okay? So the words are here. You probably don't need your hymnals. This week, I want you to remember what author Catherine Schultz reminds us, which is that she asks, what does it feel like to be wrong? Think about it. It feels bad, right? Embarrassing. And she says, no, actually, that's what it feels like to realize you're wrong. Because being wrong feels exactly the same as being right. So my invitation this week is to just keep remembering that possibility, whatever's coming out of your mouth, whatever you're feeling, you might be wrong. And so let us meet this world with more openness, more curiosity, and more love. Our worship service has ended, but our service just begins. Go in peace and in love. Amen.